I think I'll go ahead and get started. And then as I see, I'll keep letting people in, but I want to be mindful of everybody's time. So, welcome everyone. My name is Cynthia Pereda. I am the director for the National Applied AI Consortium, and I'm very excited to be bringing you all LinkedIn. I think that this is a very important session. We recently released in our newsletter about the need and with the labor market, right? And their report that they released recently for AI. And I thought it was extremely interesting. I think that this is a conversation that definitely needs to be had and at the community college level, right? So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on over to Talia.
Thanks so much, Cynthia. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you all today. I'm Talia, and I'm a partnership manager on LinkedIn Social Impact Team, focused on working with organizations that are ensuring every member of the global workforce has access to economic opportunity. And I just wanted to briefly set the stage for today's conversation, because as we all know, AI isn't just changing the tools we use, but new roles are emerging, skills requirements are changing, and people are looking for guidance on how to navigate this new landscape. So that's really why we're here today. And LinkedIn has a unique vantage point into some of the changes. With over 1 billion members on the platform, over 142,000 schools, and over 42,000 unique skills. Today, we're going to talk about how you can use those insights with some of our AI-powered tools. And the goals of this session today is to understand where AI is driving new roles and different skill demands, and to help students and yourselves showcase strengths through your LinkedIn profiles and our AI-enabled tools. So with that, I'm excited to introduce our two speakers today. Casey Weston is a senior manager of public policy and economic graph, and Katrina is a senior social impact manager for our employee and community programs. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Casey.
Hey there. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here speaking with you all. I'm going to walk through a few of the labor market insights that we can offer from LinkedIn's perspective. I'll walk through the broader context of the labor market, but then, of course, as we're here to talk about AI, I'll dive into what we can see right now in terms of the AI impacts on the labor market. And then I'd like to think together with you all about charting a path forward. So I encourage you to throw questions and comments in the chat as we think together about how you all can prepare yourselves, your students, your communities to take the most advantage of the AI transformation that is underway. So first, I want to acknowledge that regardless of what the data says about AI impacts in the labor market or what's happening, it's a difficult labor market right now. And so a lot of people are feeling a lot of pain, whether they're looking for jobs or they're considering career transitions. We can see that particularly in the United States, this is the dark blue color there at the bottom. We had a bit of optimism in 2021, 2022, coming out of the pandemic. And since then, we've had a pretty steady decline in terms of the workforce confidence. And so what that reflects is that the labor market's getting a little bit tougher for everyone. And we're going to walk through some of the reasons for that and some of what we're seeing with that. But I just want to acknowledge that before we get started, because sometimes jumping right into the data can make it seem like it's a cold, calculating thing, but it's important to recognize how we're all feeling. As I go through these slides, you'll see QR codes in them. They link to the reports or the websites where we are housing a lot of this data and where you can find more of the information on both the methodology as well as the findings of the particular topic that's being discussed in the slide. So that was an understanding of how we're feeling. Let's get into some of the data that we can see from our platform. And all of this data really comes from the way that our members, as Talia mentioned, over 1 billion around the globe, are interacting on our platform, are noting how they're changing employers, how they're changing their skills, and the way that they're moving through the workforce over time. So one thing that you can see just on the left here, it's the hiring rate, which means the extent to which any given member is changing their position and their employer over time, is that we had a huge dip, of course, with COVID. You don't even need a lot of these charts don't have years on them because we just want to look at the overall trends. You're welcome to dive into the data more deeply at the QR code. But you'll see there the huge dip, which we know is around March 2020 when COVID hit, and then this enormous explosion of hiring activity activity afterwards. And if you look at this carefully, you'll see that the area, if I have to hark all the way back to like senior year calculus to think about this, but the area under the curve or under the line rather, where that COVID curve is happening is much smaller than that area over the curve afterwards, meaning there was a lot of hiring, even a lot more hiring than we might have expected from that dip in COVID. And so what happens? Well, if perhaps there was too much hiring, we now have a dip in hiring. And so we're below the line, meaning there's a reduction in the amount of hiring activity. And as you can see, we're not alone in this in the US. This is happening all over developed markets around the world. So what this means is when we ask the question, well, how many job openings are there for any given person or job seeker on our platform? We had this huge bump after COVID where there were, any given job seeker might have had two jobs waiting for them available. Now that's dipping just under one. And so what that means is that it can be a very difficult labor market, particularly for people getting out there and searching today. So some other indicators that we have that suggest that the labor market is cooling down and is slackening is first on gender. So we know that typically as hiring markets get slower, the share of women hired into leadership slows down. That's an unfortunate correlation. It's certainly not one that I'm happy to report on, but it's one that we know exists, and we can see that in the data. Going all the way back from 2016, you see this gradual rise of the share of women hired into leadership, and then we've been at a decline for the last couple of years, suggesting again that the labor market is slowing down. Another indicator that we have of this is the reduction in job transition. So this one is interesting, and I want to spend a little bit of time on it. So what you're looking at on the right-hand slide here, the right-hand side of the slide here, are the share of people applying to jobs in new industries from the ones in which they work. So you can see those applications very high. Lots of people applying to try to switch industries and try something new. Very cool. That stays about constant over time. But when you look at the number of people actually succeeding in switching jobs from industry A to industry B, that's been declining, particularly in these last few years. What does that mean? That means that employers don't have to take risks on someone coming from a new industry. They have enough applicants from their own industry that they can say, hey, I'd rather take someone that has contextual experience rather than try someone with new experience. We don't think that's a permanent trend, but it does again indicate that the labor market is slackening. So why is it slowing down? Well, it must be AI, right? If we look at the news, there's a white-collar bloodbath. AI is upending jobs. Obviously, it's AI. Well, that's certainly what the news cycle would like us to think. And so we've been pushed by just about every partner that we work with to look into this. We looked specifically at occupations that feature a lot of skills or require a lot of skills that can be replicated by generative AI and compared hiring among those occupations with occupations whose skills can't be easily replicated by generative AI. And as you can see here, we kind of got a lot of noise. You can see that those occupations that are highly exposed to generative AI did see a big dip in hiring in 2023, but now the hiring activity among growth among those occupations is actually more than for occupations that are not as exposed to generative AI. So our data doesn't really clearly say that occupational exposure to generative AI is what's driving this change in hiring. Well, we heard actually don't think about occupations. It's just entry-level workers. It's because of AI, entry-level workers can't find a job. So we compared entry-level workers to managers and more senior folks. And we saw, as you can see here, that generally speaking, the trend is about the same. You can see some differences at certain points in the time series, but actually the growth in hiring for entry-level workers right now is, while still negative, a little bit above that of managers and senior level folks. We have research coming out on this soon. You can see that's why it's an unpolished snapshot of a picture. We'll have that data out for you soon, but I wanted to steal it for this deck to kind of show you that we're really digging around trying to find the impacts, but it doesn't appear to be clear. Well, when we shared this, other folks said, well, listen, it's actually entry-level workers in tech. Those are the ones that are really getting hit badly by this. And so when we looked at the share of entry-level workers in tech and compared it from before ChatGPT came out to after ChatGPT came out, we do see that there's a decline in the share of entry-level workers in tech, but there's actually a decline across industries. And most likely, that just aligns to a slackening of the labor market. So there could be a lot of reasons for this, whether it's tariff uncertainty, whether it's just a slowdown after the huge hiring post-COVID, whether it's cyclical patterns in the economy. It could be any number of factors. And we can't say definitively that it's not related to AI, but from all the different cuts that we can do, it seem clear to us that it is definitely driven by AI. What we do know is that there is an enormous increase in hiring of AI engineering talent. So unlike all the other numbers that you've seen in every slide that I presented so far, where there's like a steady decline over the last couple of years, you can see that hiring for AI engineering talent here is soaring. It does look like it's finally slowing down, but that's after year-over-year growth above 15-20% for the last year or so. So what does this tell us? Well, amazing. If you're an AI engineer, you're training to be an AI engineer, you're well set, so congrats to you. But it also means that businesses are bringing in talent that is likely to change the way that we all work. And that may be the message that's important. So whether it's already underway, certainly it is, or if it's, we're already seeing the impacts, it's something that students, staff, workers should all be preparing for and be thinking about. And I want to contextualize this because we've been talking already about the changes that AI is bringing, but we've seen that the world of work is changing rapidly. And this was true even before the introduction of ChatGPT and generative AI, for example. So some of the ways in which we see that are that careers are becoming more complex. What do I mean by that? Someone entering the workforce today is on track to have twice as many roles during their career as someone who entered the workforce 15 years ago. So people are moving through jobs much more quickly and seeing an evolution of their careers that is much more complex and varied than in the past. Secondly, we see that there are new career paths to occupy and to train for. So of people starting a new job today, 10% of them are starting in a job title that did not exist in the year 2000. And in the US, that's actually 20%. So among the people on this call, perhaps 1 out of 5 have a job title that did not exist in the year 2000. And so if that's the change that's happened before AI, you can imagine how much change we expect to see over the next 25 years. All of this change in career paths, as well as career complexity, have led to an increased need to signal skills rather than direct experience. So saying I'm a data analyst doesn't necessarily mean very much if you were a data analyst in the year 2005 versus a data analyst now. Data analysts would rely on not completely different skills, but very different skills and tools in those two contexts. And so it's becoming increasingly important to signal very clearly what skills have been acquired and retained over time. And one of the most important bucket of skills that we've seen folks on our platform mention, as well as in other places in the labor market, are human skills or soft skills, those that are used to accompany the use of technology and that are really critical for making sure it's deployed effectively. So these are things like communication, adaptability, resilience, problem solving, teamwork. Very difficult to qualify, but important that anyone entering the labor market today can tell a story about how they have acquired those skills and are ready to deploy them in a new job. So if it hasn't happened already, we do expect that all that change I just mentioned is about to become even more dramatic with the continued introduction and rollout of generative AI in the workforce. We've done an analysis to ask for every single occupation on our platform what the extent of disruption to the skill sets is likely to be. So we've asked 2 questions. First, of all the skills required for a given role, what share of those skills can be replicated by generative AI? And second, for all of those skills, what share of them are complementary to generative AI? And I encourage all of you to think about that for your roles and to think about that for the roles into which your students are likely to be stepping. So to give some examples here, in the insulated category, which are those roles that have a lot of generative AI complementary skills, but not so many replicable skills, we have a job like a dentist. So a dentist could use generative AI to help brainstorm about different diagnoses or to help calendar different patients or different meetings with their staff. But I haven't yet had a dentist propose to go into my mouth and fix a cavity with generative AI, and I don't think that's coming anytime soon. On the other hand, we have someone like a software engineer who relies on a lot of skills that can be replicated by generative AI, like the initial coding process, but also skills that cannot. So back and forth, for example, with a potential client to understand what changes are necessary in the design or the functionality of a particular tool. And then we have folks whose skills are likely to be highly disrupted. So these are folks like legal associates who may have done initial drafting of contracts, for example. This is something that generative AI tools may be very, very good at doing. This doesn't mean that legal associates are going to disappear. It means that the skills that legal associates use on a daily basis are likely to change dramatically. And you can see we've sort of bucketed these occupations by industry to examine the extent to which generative AI is likely to have an impact on different industries. And you can see that some of those that for the past 20 to 30 years have been viewed as the most secure, like tech and finance, are among those that are most likely to be impacted heavily by generative AI in terms of the skills disruption, whereas those that may have been viewed as more traditional or less exciting, in quotes, like construction or healthcare, are those that are less likely to be disrupted. And so an important element of this is to make sure that as people are thinking about starting their careers, they're really taking an open view without some of the perceptual biases that we often like to place on the specific career paths or roles. So, as I mentioned, just to dig into that a little bit more, we can already see certain job functions and certain roles evolving due to the introduction of generative AI. I mentioned a software engineer, but there's others like an accountant, for example, where we certainly expect that we still need accountants. I want to emphasize that this does not mean the role is disappearing. We need people to make sure that tax laws are being followed, et cetera. But the way that an accountant works is likely to be very different. So how should people in these types of roles be thinking about the years ahead? Or people who have been maybe training for these roles, what would be a good way for them to think about where to go next? Well, I'd like to take us to New York City in 1882. Imagine that you are a lamplighter and your job is to go around and light lamps, and you just heard that Edison lit up the first square mile of New York City with an electric light bulb. Well, you might say, okay, I'm not going to be able to be a lamplighter anymore. Let me go into an industry that I know will not change. I want to go into horse carriage riding. But I'm going to be smart about it. I'm going to put my horse carriage station in a place where I already know that electric light is going to go. That's an example of leveraging new technology, even though you're not working directly in that field, to make sure that you have an advantage in the career that you're going to follow. You might say, okay, lighting is the new thing. I want to go, I know there's going to be a big need for bulbs. I'm going to go work at a bulb manufacturing plant because I know that's gonna exist. Or if that seems too direct and too in the middle of things, too difficult, you can work for an enabler. In this case, that would be someone laying the hundreds, thousands of miles of electrical cable required to light up the world. Or you might say, actually, I know that there's going to be evolution in this. Let me work to build the lampshades because no one's even thinking about lampshades yet. We haven't had enough light to need a lampshade. That's going to be a new industry. Or if you're really imaginative, you might say, well, since we're laying all of this electricity, what other products could be developed with electricity that I might want to get into and that are really going to explode in the next few years? So for me, this is a lot easier to think about because, of course, I've been alive for all of these things to exist. And so it's easy to think about where I would have liked to have placed myself, where to find myself around in 1882 in New York. Some examples of, the horse carriage would be ones that I mentioned just before, like the dentist or even a geologist, right? Someone who will continue to need their knowledge and deploy their knowledge of rock formations and the stability of soil, but can use generative AI to speed up the way that they work and to communicate more efficiently with people who could care less about soil but need to build a building on it, right? So important ways, even in functions that we don't expect to transition as quickly, to integrate generative AI into the way that we work. But we can also think about getting directly into that value chain. So sort of the right-hand side of my lamplighter analogy. The first way would be obvious. With the chart that I showed before, let's all become AI engineers, right? We can work in data centers, we can work in compute. There's going to be a lot of demand for our skills. Amazing. As we know, that's not a possibility for everyone, and nor does everyone want to be an AI engineer. And at some point, there will be a limited need for new AI engineers. So where else in this value chain can we fit in? Well, there's the enabling factor, right? So for electricity, it was building wires. For AI, it's thinking about the industrial equipment that's required, the energy that's required, semiconductors, IT infrastructure, cybersecurity. These are all enabling factors that need a lot of workers with a lot of different skill sets, many of which would not necessarily require a four-year college degree, but which are very highly paid, stable, and complicated jobs that are critical to the evolution of this environment. Thinking about sort of the lampshades would be thinking about AI-enabled technology. So, what are the most immediate applications of generative AI that we could deploy and use? And so, this might be thinking about new ways to use AI to build some of the tools that we've been doing or we've been needing and services that we've been providing in the past. And then, if I had enough imagination and gusto, I would be thinking of AI-enabled businesses, ones that we can't even imagine yet, but which will sit on the AI layer that's being built out right now. If I knew all that, I'd have $1 billion in investment, and I might not be talking to you this morning. But your students have the gusto to think about that effectively and to brainstorm and creatively to think about what those businesses might be. And we know that given the rate of change in skills and in the workforce, entrepreneurship may be an amazing and critical avenue for students emerging today. So already beginning to brainstorm and think about that will be crucial for them. So, okay, great. That's all great in theory. Where do we go in practice? Like, how should any of us or students in, entering the workforce today be thinking about their AI skills? Well, at LinkedIn, we use an upskilling framework that tries to walk through all the way from the beginning to understand what skill someone wants to obtain and how they might deploy that skill. So I'm going to walk through this just step by step. I think it's pretty critical for everyone to be able to understand what generative AI is and how it works. And I say that even if someone's not engaged in the workforce, because it influences all of the information that someone might receive today. Even if they're reading a newspaper, they're likely reading Gen AI informed text. It's important to understand this new way that information is moving around the world. Second, it's important to be able to apply that. And that's particularly true for people in the workforce today. So great. I know how Copilot works or ChatGPT works. Where should I be thinking about applying it in my tasks on a day-to-day basis? And that goes back to asking the questions that were in that chart of insulated, augmented, and disrupted roles. What share of my skills and tasks on a day-to-day basis are replicable by generative AI, which are complementary? And of those that are replicable, which ones should I be using it for that are responsible, that are ethical, that allow me to check the outputs and stay in the loop to make sure that I'm doing quality control? That those skills required to deploy generative AI effectively is part of the applying layer. Then there's those of us who would like to build with generative AI. And I was at a conference for rural innovation where some of the speakers were saying that they had previously taught coding, Python, SQL, and now they had swept all that to the side. They were entirely focused on building because this is sort of the new base layer for people working in technical roles. So this is really understanding how to think about agents, how to think about AI to do automation, to handle repeat tasks that we would like it to do, and really changing the way that we work in a more fundamental way. And then for those that are really advanced, thinking about training and maintaining models or specializing. And that's something that it's helpful for people to understand even as they're moving through their education, so that they can understand how to engage with other folks that are involved in that in the workforce later on. So with that, that's sort of our walkthrough of what we're seeing in the workforce, how it transitions into the way that students today, as well as members of the workforce, can think about their own job, and then the skilling that needs to happen to get us all to where we would like to be able to move forward. So I don't see too many questions in the chat yet. Happy to answer them there. Otherwise, I'll pass it over to Katrina.
Thanks very much, Casey. And thank you for that fascinating overview. Oh, there go the slides.
Slides disappeared, sorry.
Um, we'll just wait for those to come back up. But in the meantime, that was super fascinating for me. This data is always changing. And so, even hearing the most recent data is fascinating, even for somebody who works in LinkedIn. So thank you very much for that. So now I just want to take a moment to discuss how we're practically addressing the data and creating tools and resources on and with the platform to help us meet this moment. So next slide, please. We call LinkedIn the network that works for you. And so your network should be built around the people and relationships that are closest to you and most important in your sphere. And we bring that network to life through our tools, our data, our insights. Ideally, so that there are beneficial outcomes at the end of it. For some, that may be a job, but for folks who are not looking for a next role, it might be other things. It might be connecting to alumni or a prospective student, or finding an opportunity to upskill so that you can grow in your role. Next slide, please. On the back end, all of this is powered by LinkedIn's economic graph, which consists of all of the data and connections between our members, our open roles, our skills, and our schools. And this is a very real map of what the working world looks like. It's ever changing and it's constantly informing how we create content, learning resources, and talent insights. Next slide, please. But at the core of this network is your professional brand. So, how you show up on LinkedIn dictates how effective that network can be for you. Next slide. So I understand many of you may have created a LinkedIn profile years ago. It lies dormant somewhere. Some folks on the call may have never created a LinkedIn profile at all. That's okay. But I'm here to remind you that if you haven't given it some love in a little while, this is the moment to do so because your profile is really the nexus of that network and it does dictate how effective it can be for you. So we work with thousands of job seekers directly every year. Often we do profile reviews with them. And these are kind of the top 5 places where we ask folks to have a look and get started. The first 2 I would bundle together, profile photo and cover photo. Just ensure that these are choices that represent you and make your profile a bit visually arresting. The next is your headline. And the headline piece is really important because when hiring managers, recruiters, anyone who's searching for a subject matter expert looks for people like you, all that will come up of you is a tiny profile photo and that headline. So this is you putting out your flag and saying, here's who I am. In this example on the right, Erica H. James has said, Dean at the Wharton School. That's all she needs to say. The next piece is the summary, also known as the About section. I see a lot of folks use this in a way similar to how you would put a statement of intent at the top of a CV. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I would invite you to go bigger and bolder with this section. Recruiters, hiring managers, people just looking for subject matter experts pay a lot of attention to this section. It's an opportunity not just to give that context of your educational background and experience, but equally to say, what you're passionate about, what you are energized by, and what you aspire to do. And then finally, the next section that I would have folks take a look at is their featured section. So if you're in academe, an administrative role, this is the role you're staying in. You're not looking for that next thing, but you do want to demonstrate to people what your subject matter expertise is. This is a great place to do so. You can show people your academic CV, connect to a portfolio or a website, publications that you've had, places where you've been mentioned in the news or media, or just interesting projects that you've accomplished at the university. Next slide, please. So, of course, you can refresh your profile on your own. We also have an AI-powered profile assistant to help you with that if you wish, as well as many other AI-powered tools on the platform. I'm not going to talk about all of them today. We have deeper dive sessions for those, but I wanted to take a moment to just highlight some of the ones that we're seeing as most effective, particularly for career starters. Next slide, Casey. So the first is the AI-powered coaching for practice scenario tools. This is a pretty cool tool that you actually speak to. And what you can do is set up any scenario that might occur as part of a workplace conversation. So it could be a difficult conversation between a manager and a team member. It could be you trying to organize for a salary bump. Where I've found it most effective for job seekers that we work with is using it for interview prep. So what an individual can do is set a persona in here. As you're getting started, you can make it a friendly and easygoing persona. And as you gain more confidence, you can make it a persona that's a little bit more challenging. And you can ask it to specifically address things that you might know are a weakness for you. So as an example, if you've had a career gap and you feel a bit of anxiety talking about that, you can ask the tool to focus in on that area, work through it over and over again until you feel comfortable with the narrative and confident going forward for your interview. Next slide, please, Casey. The next tool that I love is AI-powered job search. Job search right now is frustrating. Casey laid it out for us pretty well. It's a highly competitive market. There's a lot of job hugging going on, and folks feel like they're spending an inordinate amount of time looking for the role that's right for them. There's kind of three primary pain points that members have addressed with us. The first is that it's very difficult to find relevant and interesting jobs. The second is that when you do, it takes a huge amount of time to determine whether your skills and qualifications match what that employer is looking for. The third is that when you do take the time to apply, it often seems to go in a black box and you don't know what happens next. So this tool is meant to address some of those primary challenges. And what I love about it is, yes, you can search in a traditional way by job title or by industry, but you can also search using natural language for things like the kind of impact you'd like to make or the types of skills you would like to use. It's brilliant at finding jobs that you would never think to look for. And early indications that we're seeing, particularly for folks who are perhaps at a further remove from the labor force, is that this is working really effectively to connect them to opportunities that they otherwise would have never seen. Next slide, please. And the third tool I want to highlight is our Career Explorer. So this is a really fun tool where you can pop in the city or the region that you live in, and then a job title that you either currently have or are aspiring to. And what the tool does is show you other job titles that use a similar skill set. So for career starters or folks who are looking for a career pivot, it's a great way to begin to identify where else you can look to take your career path. And because it outlines the skills that are typically needed in different careers, it can also identify for you where you might currently have gaps and can look to upskill. Next slide, please. So all of those AI-powered tools on the platform are great. We're harnessing the technology to help job seekers in new ways, but of course, that's not enough. We know that 70% of job skills are predicted to change by 2030, and AI is a key driver for that. And so we need to provide other tools and resources to members to assure that they're ready for that moment. Next slide. One of the major ways we do that is on LinkedIn Learning. So we now have hundreds of courses specifically on AI upskilling available. I've highlighted just a very small handful here, including how to research and write using generative AI tools and creating learning plans with AI. And for those of you who may be working with students who don't currently have access to LinkedIn Learning, I strongly encourage you to check out opportunity.linkedin.com. And there you will find dozens of courses and certification pathways specifically focused on AI, all of which are open, unlocked, free, available for anyone to use. So it's a fantastic resource. Next slide, please. And then final thing I wanted to chat about is our AI coaches program. So for over a decade now, LinkedIn has run the LinkedIn Coaches program, which supports professionals overcoming barriers with one-to-one career conversations. We've now found ourselves at the moment of evolving that program to offer AI coaches, where we focus on AI fluency, how to use AI-powered tools effectively for professional development, and as Casey talked about, to really emphasize the importance of human skills, things like adaptability, creativity, problem solving, decision making. These are the things that we need to ensure the folks we're working with are prepared for the future of work. And this is just a bit of a teaser for all of you. Talia can give us more information, but our intention is to do an AI coaches session for the consortium in the near future. So that's it for my slides. I think we are going to move into our Q&A section now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So now we welcome everyone. You can come off mute if you'd like to ask a question or if you'd like to put something in the chat. I know there was a good amount of feedback, like positive feedback on the chat. So thank you all.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Career Explorer? I know you kind of talked a little bit about that, but can I go a little more deeper into that? I work at a college and, I thought that was very interesting because a lot of times I'll meet students and they're not too sure what they want to do and stuff like that. So I thought that was very good. Thank you.
Yeah, Career Explorer is a fantastic tool. I would recommend, I know Talia has shared the link here, just jumping in and playing around with it. I would also say, I didn't talk about it in these slides, but equally within the LinkedIn Learning menu, there is a related tool, LinkedIn Coaching, where you can ask the chatbot for opportunities to upskill. So you can tell it different roles that you might be interested in or industries that you want to work in, and it can create a learning plan for you. The tool is really great because it's connected both to the individual's LinkedIn profile and to LinkedIn Learning. So it will look at the profile, it will look at LinkedIn Learning, and then give folks an overview of courses or pathways that they can pursue.
And maybe just one one additional layer on the Career Explorer, just sort of where that data comes from is directly from the platform. So we get to see the skills that people are using in their roles, the way that people are adding skills to try to advertise them as they learn them in their roles. And so we're able to use that data to help job seekers say, okay, I'm in, X place. I'd like to explore a new job based off of the skills that I have. what new job would allow me some overlap of skills so I can leverage those skills that I have, but would require some new skills. And of those new skills, which are they? And then you can transition over to the tool that Katrina just mentioned to identify a learning path for yourself to acquire those skills, right? I think it could even be useful for someone starting off. Maybe they're not saying, oh, I'm coming from a specific occupation, but I'd like to really market the skills that are in demand and of high note for a particular occupation. What are those? This is a way to look at those skills and understand what they might look like based off of the different location that you're in. There's also a little bit of data there on the level of demand for specific occupations by location, which of course changes very quickly over time. So it's, should be one resource among many, but certainly a way for students or job seekers to think about the extent to which a job they're interested in is in high demand.
I see a question from Robin about helpful skills we've developed and used with AI. I mean, I think for me, in the last whatever it is now, 8 or 10 months, just context engineering, like, sometimes called prompt engineering, just finding those ways of ensuring that you are creating parameters. There's a bit of play to it, to be honest, so being able to go in and set limitations or adapt your language, and when you do that, seeing how the various agents that you're working with respond to it has really been a game changer and very important for my kind of learning and how to use these things more effectively. Casey, did you have one you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think um, for me, I want to say it's been like polishing my problem framing. So at first when I was using Copilot or ChatGPT to try to do tasks either in my personal life or for work, I would just put in the information as it was coming out of my head. And then I realized that that's not the best way to use the tool. You have to be very specific. It works much better and much more energy efficiently if you scope out the problem clearly, if you provide the exact context in which you're trying to solve the problem, if you already have a framework in mind that you'd like to work with and you provide that. And that skill is actually very useful outside of using generative AI, right? That's the same skill that consultants would use when problem solving, or emergency responders use when problem solving. Like everybody can apply that problem solving framing skill, but by doing that, it can actually improve the way that you communicate problems to others. So we've all received an email where someone's like, "Oh, I need this, this, and this," and you're like, "What are you even talking about?" Right? Being better at prompting generative AI is the same skill required to be better at sending that email to communicate a problem more effectively to a partner or a colleague. So I think that's something a skill that I didn't expect to develop, but have developed because you kind of have to use it efficiently. And then there was a question from Robin as well about resources to help ease instructors into allowing AI into the classroom. So Microsoft and I think OpenAI actually have partnered with the American Federation of Teachers. Obviously, this is at the K through 12 level, which is a little bit different, but I do think that there are some similarities in terms of this transition taking place in classrooms where educators are seeking to strike a new balance, both internally within their classroom as well as within the institution, the community college or the school or the district, as well as across the field, right? And so being tapped into some of those conversations, even if they're happening at the K through 12 level, might be helpful to understand sort of what the new, if not standards, the new thoughts are about how to incorporate generative AI effectively into classrooms. Uh, in conversations, to be transparent, my mom is a teacher, so these are conversations that she and I have regularly. Where a year ago she was like, "It's terrible. I would never allow it in a classroom. It's awful." And then she's like, "Oh, you know what? Actually, it's been kind of cool to do this and this, but not to do this." I do think that in like facilitating those conversations is really helpful. And this is going to sound like a very shameless plug, and it's not really because I did not use LinkedIn that much before I started working at LinkedIn. But LinkedIn is like the type of place where you can have those conversations, right? Like you're seeing what other like a teacher could say, "Oh, this is what I learned today," or "This is what I would never use it for." Like being able to have those conversations with other professors, teachers, educational staff can be useful on the platform.
Casey, and I wanted to put in a little shameless plug in there. We here at the consortium, we are also offering generative AI trainings with Microsoft. So I did go ahead and put a link in the chat so that if anyone hasn't taken them, there is an opportunity for you to do that. So make sure you go and check the upcoming dates because there are quite a few.
Quick question. I mean, when I think of LinkedIn, obviously largest, business social network out there. I work in career services, so I see a lot of the AI on the recruiting side, how that's changing, the ATS, the onboarding, even AI and in interviews and stuff like that. And I would love, I read certain things, it's all the recruiting, all the HR are using AI to, handle all the thousands and thousands of applications that they're getting. In fact, I was just reading about a new software where it will actually do the actual applying for you. It's gotten to that point. I would love to find out because you guys are so in touch with businesses, is the feedback. What do businesses think of that? Because now you're hearing that HR departments are running your resume through a scanner. Was it created by a human or was it created by AI? So it seems to be like a war between employees and job seekers. So I was wondering if you guys ever did any kind of reporting on that, or are you planning on getting some asking them about that? Because I think the biggest frustration is, and you hear it all the time, oh, I'm sending out 100, 200 resumes and no one's getting back to me. You know, part of my job here at the college is I really try to educate students on ATS, how things are changing. We do have a couple tools that we use here. The college does has a couple software programs that we use. But then I go out and I read about, what employers are thinking of these tools. And it's just really, I would really love to find out if you guys have gotten any feedback on that or done any kind of reporting as to what the employers think of when it comes to hiring, the whole hiring process.
Maybe I'll take a first go. Katrina, you're probably better positioned to talk about some of the tools that we have to help people think through that. I would say this is not the first time I've gotten this question, even today. And it's something that's evolving so quickly. I don't know that well, I'll speak for myself. I don't have a full answer. I have heard employers call out that the reminder that AI is not the only skill, and this goes back to how to use AI in the classroom. So an employer said that they would hire people who were great at using AI, and they actually brought AI into the work environment in a much more effective way. But they didn't know how, because they didn't have any career experience, they didn't know how to scan the outputs of AI for something meaningful, contextually relevant, even accurate in some cases, because they didn't have, no fault of their own necessarily. They just hadn't developed those skills to understand the context. So I think increasingly there will be an in the class, just to pause to go back to the previous conversation, in the classroom, that could be one goal, is to say, great, I'm not surprised that you could write a 100-page report if I asked you to, because you could just put into generative AI. But what are the actual findings? How would you communicate them most effectively face to face? How have you checked through what you found? Like, these are the sorts of questions that are really critical to using generative AI effectively. And I suspect that I've heard that employers are beginning to incorporate those into their hiring pipeline. So to say, okay, great, you've submitted a decent resume. That means at a baseline, you can use generative AI effectively. Wonderful. How would you respond to questions about situational awareness, multiple choice questions, applying these like very short but punchy little tests that have to be taken essentially by a human, right? Like using a CAPTCHA check to follow up and make sure that someone's actually deploying critical thinking behind what they've submitted. So that's kind of just from my very limited vantage point, sort of what I've seen. Katrina, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the way that some of our tools allow overlap with that.
Yeah, and I would say, Casey, like similarly, we don't have hard data on this at this stage. It's more in the realm of anecdotal, but when we do invite recruiters and hiring managers in to speak with the job seekers that we're working with, we certainly hear a lot of criticism around AI slop. So, perhaps grammatically, technically correct cover letters and CVs, but things that have no heart to them. They're saying a lot with saying nothing at all. And typically recruiters and hiring managers are smart people and they see through that very quickly. So, it's not a matter of trying to discourage folks from using these tools, but it is to say to them, use them critically, use them effectively, right? And it's developing that skill set to understand where it's augmenting and supporting the foundational work that you've put in versus just trying to get it to do it for you. And I think that's where the difference is. Like using an AI chatbot as a thought partner, as something that you dance back and forth with that improves upon that core of what you've created. That's fantastic. That's where you get gold, but just kind of without giving like the context, the information that it needs, the detail, all of the work that shows who you are and why you're the perfect candidate. Employers are seeing through that and they're seeing through it quite quickly. So yeah, I think all we can do, especially for career starters, is really encourage them to generate as much of the content as they can themselves and really make sure that they're using everything that, makes them unique and interesting and put that into the application.
Great. I don't see any more questions. We have a few minutes left. If anybody else wants to come off mute and ask something.
I do have a comment. Sorry, this is Antonio. And basically, it's just a thank you note for LinkedIn because overall, in our world of community colleges, when we're developing AI programs or any type of program, we need workforce demand or labor market demand, data. And that's not easy to find in AI in particular. So you guys are creating reports that are extremely useful for community colleges for us to be able to develop those AI programs. So don't stop producing those reports. Don't stop sharing that data. It's just an encouragement and thank you message, but also encouragement to please continue doing it and sharing through the consortium. Our role is to really make it available to every community college that wants to develop an AI program. The more reports you create, the better data for us to demonstrate why we have to teach AI, why we have to prepare the workforce for those opportunities.
Great. Okay, so I think with that, then if there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and conclude and thank the LinkedIn team. This was absolutely wonderful. I think that everyone is very happy in the chat. So thank you all, and I'll make sure to get